Really funny. You're not that good looking. My name's Dan. I'm an alcoholic. I got a sobriety date of July 27th, 2017. I got a sponsor. His name's Anthony, sitting right there, and I got a home group called No Nonsense. I like coming to this group mostly because I get to be up on a stage and for a little bit just kind of feel like a rock star. Because when I was out there running and gunning, on my self-will, one of the purposes I would try to will myself into is like being in a metal band, right? And it's extra metal today. We got these flowers. I feel like I'm at a funeral, and things are going to be good. So one of the things I like to start out talking about whenever I share my story is, again, on that self-will run riot that's already been talking about tonight. I tried for 22 years to find the solution to sobriety, right? I wanted to get sober on my own will. I tried a bunch of different things and it never worked out. And lo and behold, there's this little book here, right? And if you pop open that book and you start right at the beginning in the preface, it says, "This is the fourth edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The first edition appeared in April 1939. And in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. The second edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The third edition, which came off the press in 1976, achieved a circulation of 11,698,000. So my first inclination popping this open is the word hope, right? If I was looking for a solution and I wasn't finding it, well, they put it right there in the beginning. Something's got to be happening here, right? There's something going on if these people continue to print new versions of this book in the millions, right? And then it goes to the forward of the first edition, and it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. It is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all." And I was like, I'm a sick person. I can't stop fucking drinking, right? I have this, sorry, there's kids here. I have this phenomenon of craving, right? And it's an allergy, right? When I put this thing into my body, bad stuff continues to happen. And when you flip to the forward to the second edition, it says Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. And I'm like, okay, this mushroom effect is happening, right? Here's more evidence, right? 6,000 groups, 150,000 recovered alcoholics. I'm a sick person. I think I might be alcoholic. I'm looking for a solution. This is becoming a little more convincing, right? Third edition, Alcoholics Anonymous was conservatively estimated at more than 1 million, with almost 28,000 groups meeting in over 90 countries. Okay, so this thing's going global, right? We're starting to get, there's a worldwide effect here. Once again, something these people are doing, something that might be contained in the pages of this book seems to be working. And then finally, in the forward to the fourth edition, AA has just about doubled to an estimated 2 million or more, with nearly 100,800 groups meeting in approximately 150 countries worldwide. So again, when I read the preface and the forwards in this book, I start to get a lot of hope, right? And the thing about me is that I would never pick up this book and read those, right? I'm too smart for this. I skip all that crap, including the doctor's opinion, and I just go to Bill's story, right? That's chapter 1. Who needs to read all the other stuff, right? But fortunately, one of the things that I've learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I am alcoholic and I need help, right? One of the things that we talk about all the time is how I can't keep myself sober. And, that's true for me too. On page 18 in the big book, it says, "But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished." So right there, they're talking about the sponsor, right? And one of the things that I needed was a sponsor, right? I needed somebody who could explain this thing to me, not only in a way that I could understand, but in a way that made me realize that I can't do this myself, because I tried that over and over and over again. And when I get into my story, I don't want to stand up here and give a long drunkalogue, right? We all have circumstances, right? My grand sponsor says all the time that, circumstances aren't what gets us here, right? The circumstance isn't really the bottom. The bottom is actually whenever the shit falls out of your ears and you're able to actually start hearing what the people in Alcoholics Anonymous are saying, right? When you're able to actually, put your faith in a higher power, put your faith in a sponsor, and put your faith in the program of AA, that's when things kind of start to change, right? So that was sort of my experience in the bottom, right? Or with the bottom. But when I think back to when I started drinking, I can't remember the first time I got drunk. Lots of people will tell you they remember the first time they got drunk. I remember my dad would drink, and I would go, and he'd put all the bottles in a box in the garage, and I'd go take the sips, the little drip sips at the end of it, and I'd steal some beers out of his fridge from time to time. But I remember the first time I experienced powerlessness and unmanageability, right? So in step one, we have to have this honest and this thorough step one experience, right? Again, I thought I was a problem drinker when I got here, not an alcoholic, so I didn't even know what that was. But I think back to this experience, and I was in 8th grade, and I was hanging out with some older guys. I was dating a girl in high school. I was lying to her, dishonesty, right out of the gate. I told her I was older, so she thought I was in high school too. And they thought it'd be cool to go hang out with these girls and have a couple of drinks before. And I remember they looked at me and they were like, you want some vodka? And it was Vladimir vodka. And I was like, sure. And they were like, have you drank before? And I was like, yeah, man, I've drank. And I'd never had a sip of vodka in my life. And I just wanted to be cool, right? I wanted to fit in because I was so insecure, and I wanted to hang out with the older guys. So I started slamming these little Dixie cups of Vladimir vodka. And once it started to run through my system, I got really, really sick. Ended up passing out, thank God, in a firefighter's front lawn. The guy called an ambulance. I went to the hospital and I got my stomach pumped. And I was like, 13 years old, something like that. And you would think that, maybe that would be just a wake-up call. Hey, you're 13 years old, you're fresh, you're new in this world. Maybe alcohol's not for you, right? Well, lo and behold, a couple weeks later, some kids were throwing a party, and I went to that party, and I continued to drink. And I continued to smoke weed, and I continued that entire process, right? And it wasn't really a huge problem for me. It was just kind of like the weekend thing, partying on the weekends, and no real issues, right? This is just what kids in high school do. And I was also a thief, and I stole 2 bottles of wine one night. I remember, I think I was like a junior in high school. And I stole 2 bottles of wine from my neighbor out of their wine cellar, and I drank a bottle of it. And I got really depressed. I was like an emo kid, like to listen to all that music about cutting your wrists. So I got this idea in my head, right? I got this idea in my head that, okay, I'm really drunk, I'm feeling really sad, I'm going to try to kill myself, right? So I take this knife, I start cutting, keep drinking, cutting some more, keep drinking, end up passing out. My mom finds me, thank God, on the floor. They take me to the hospital again. And again, you would think, maybe something would change here, right? But no. I was in rehab. I escaped death again, and all I'm doing is thinking about how can I get out? How can I get out? St. Patrick's Day is coming up. I want to go party with my friends. So of course I end up going, and I end up partying with those friends, right? And that didn't even take it didn't take more than someone just passing me a blunt for the first thing, and then the drinks and the booze, and I'm off to the races again. And again, it's funny. It's this. Again, that phenomenon of craving, right? I didn't realize it was happening at that young age, but it was happening, right? And that allergy that they talk about in the book, I also didn't understand that was happening, right? I couldn't stop putting the shit in my body, and every time I did, something bad happened, right? I'm not even 20 yet, and I almost died twice over alcoholism, and I just can't see it, right? On my own, I think my behavior is normal. I just can't see what's happening, and I continue, right? And I continued all the way through college, right? I got this great idea after college that I was going to become a police officer. The economy was kind of bad. I saw an ad in the paper, and I was like, I used to watch a lot of Cops, late night. Maybe this will be a cool job, especially for an alcoholic drug addict like myself. So I take the test. I scored really well on it, and I got a job. And I was like, okay, this is it. This job, this responsibility as a police officer, this is going to keep me sober, right? And for a while there, I was like, I found the word integrity, and I was like, I started to understand what that meant. And I found the word responsibility, and I started to understand what that meant. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to take this seriously, right? Well, what ended up happening, as you might guess, is that I continued to drink. I didn't drink every day like I used to. I would work really, really hard, pulling doubles, 80-hour weeks, but I'd have a day or two off here and there, and I would binge drink all day long. But I convinced myself, again, that alcoholic brain convinces ourselves, I don't have a problem. I've watched The Wire. All these cops drink, you know what I mean? This is completely normal behavior, right? If I only black out, once or twice a month, then I'm not an alcoholic anymore, right? I'm a controlled drinker who blacks out twice a month. And like the insanity of that, that I couldn't see at the time, it just continues to progress, and it continues to progress. And I ended up driving my car into a tree, and the tree blew out a storefront window. And they talk about that thin blue line bullshit, and it's kind of true. I texted the staff sergeant, and I said, hey, I crashed my car into the tree, and I blew out that storefront window. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. So again, these circumstances continue to happen to me that are terrible, right? And I said, I'm done. I'm swearing off the booze. I'm swearing it off again. 2 years, I was able to not drink after that incident. And in that 2 years, I was pretty much just dry drunk in it, like you hear people talk about. And I didn't know I was dry drunk in it, right? I was looking into all different forms of self-help. I was reading books. I was watching videos. I was on YouTube all the time. I was rolling around in the mud. I was taking ice baths. I was meditating. I was doing all of this crazy shit, and I thought I was improving my life, you know what I mean? I was like, I'm really on the right track, you know what I mean? I go grocery shopping one night, looked at a beer bottle. The label looked cool to me. I picked it up, and I drank it. And then the next day, I went back to the grocery store, and I drank another bottle. By the end of the week, I was drinking 6-packs. By the end of the month, cases of beer. I was back on the liquor and off to the races again. And, you'll hear people talk about that relapse, right? And they say that, it's so much worse. And, that's my story. Like, I picked up right where I left off. It felt like, maybe even a quarter mile forward from where I left off. Back to the booze, back to the drugs, back to the alcoholic behavior, cheating on my wife all the time. Lucky to have a job because I was going in there drunk all the time. And I remember coming home one night and looking in the mirror, and I was just kicked in the ass. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was like, something has got to change. So I checked myself back into rehab because, again, that's my go-to. When something bad happens with alcohol, just go to rehab. And I'm not knocking rehab if you've gone to one or went to one, because I went to a bunch of them. But, I refused to go to AA. I'd gone to AA plenty of times in my life, and I always went in those rooms, and I listened to what the people had to say, but, contempt prior to investigation. It was always just, F these people, they're crazy, it's just a competition to see who can tell the worst sob story. And, I refused. I refused to listen to what anybody in those rooms were saying. So I'm sitting in rehab this time, and they're making me go to these meetings, and they're making me get my slip signed. And I'm at the last meeting, right? I got one more slip to sign before I can graduate from rehab. And I've already got my plan. I know exactly where I'm going. I know exactly what I'm going to keep doing to stay sober. Again, on my own self-will, because clearly that's worked the rest of my life. And it was a 12-step meeting. And the guys in the meeting, I was the only newcomer there, right? And the guys in the meeting are all kind of sharing about how they've been slacking on the 12-step a little bit. So at the end of the meeting, they all kind of pounce on me, and they're like, oh, hey, newcomer, you want help? Similar to the experience with Brandon, right? They're giving me the numbers, they're sending me texts, and they're calling me, and for the first time in my life, I don't know what it was, but I could hear what these people were saying. And not only could I hear what they were saying, I actually wanted what they had. What they were sharing about in that meeting seemed attractive to me. And as a result of that attraction, I kept coming back. Right, so I kept coming back, and I got a sponsor. That sponsor that was very important that I mentioned before, diving into my story a little bit, because everything I just told you was my perception of what an alcoholic was, and I thought it was a problem drinker. But when I get to step one, and I start going through the book with a sponsor, and I start doing it honestly, and I start doing it thoroughly, I start to understand a little bit more about myself, right? It says that, somebody who is armed with the facts about themselves, the sponsor, the people in AA, the people who have done these steps, these are the people that are here to help you, right? And again, I mentioned that I'm alcoholic and I need help. I never knew that before, and I never felt that way before, and I only wanted to help myself, right? But what I started to realize as I got into this book was that, the definition of the alcoholic is a serious one, and everyone who's been here who's got sober before me has taken these steps, and realize that, they've got to put their trust in someone else, right? They've got to humble themselves just a little bit. They've got to get the courage to, take direction from people. And, that's what I had to do too. And I bitched and I moaned about it for a little while, and I kicked dirt and would argue with my sponsor. And one day I just kind of realized, from his direction that it's not worth it. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to just listen, and it's so much easier to just take the direction, right? So I never understood the powerlessness and the unmanageability of my life, right? And he helped me look back at that story, and he helped me break down that story, and he helped me, understand that I have this phenomenon of craving, and when presented with a drink, I can't not take it. And when I do take it, that allergy kicks in again, and really, really bad stuff happens that makes my life unmanageable. And as a result of that, I was kind of convinced, right? I was like, okay, I get down with that step one, right? I take that honest and thorough step two, and now I'm ready to kind of go through the rest of the steps. And, step two, came to believe that power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Again, without that thorough step one, I didn't know that I was insane, right? I got to believe that I'm insane. But once I actually believed that I was insane and got down with that true step one, that powerlessness and unmanageability, he said to me, you're kind of over here, right? And you just admitted to me with this big story you had about your alcoholism that you're powerless, right? And over here is a higher power, right? So if you're powerless, why is it so hard to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity? And I go, that makes a lot of sense. I tried to do this on my own for so long, and I'm powerless and I can't do it. So it's not so hard for me to come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. And then in step 3, it says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. I call my higher power God today, and I think somebody already mentioned it. It doesn't matter, right? If I look at that circle over here, that's just a higher power, a power greater than myself, it doesn't really matter what it is. I just have to believe that there's something out there that isn't me that can keep me sober. And in step 3, what I learned was that this is sort of where I start to turn it over and understand that, my selfish, self-will, my way of doing things isn't going to work. And then that step 3 prayer, I'm asking not for all of this lavish stuff, and I'm not asking for sobriety, and I'm not asking for money, and I'm not asking for women, and I'm not asking for all these things. I'm asking for the will to do God's will, right? And to be helpful to other alcoholics. And that's something I never really experienced in my life before. And I didn't really understand the impact that step 3 was going to have on me, right? It's like if I'm turning my will over to God, and then I'm willing to believe that this power can restore me to sanity, and to do God's will means to help other alcoholics and be helpful to other people, and that's what I'm going to start praying for, right? And it didn't make as much sense to me today or then as it does today. But it's a very important part of this program, right? The entire book and the entire 12 steps really is just kind of an effort of taking us out of ourselves and teaching us altruism instead, right? So instead of how am I going to serve myself today, we come to these meetings, we carry the message, we offer help to other alcoholics, and we try to see where we can be helpful to other people. And again, that word altruism is something that I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up in the dictionary. But fortunately, I had a sponsor who was able to tell me, hey, go look altruism up in the dictionary. My experience, with step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Again, my sponsor said, do you need help with this? And I was like, oh no, it's right in the book. I see the columns, I can do that. And I remember I wrote down just a bunch of stuff, right? Just like a bunch of bad stuff that happened in my life. And I read it to him, and he's sitting there, he's just kind of calmly nodding, and at the end of it, he goes, what about resentments? And I was like, I don't resent anyone. And he's like, well, you've told me a lot of stuff up until this point about your life, you know what I mean, about the relationships you're in, about your dad, right, your job, all kinds of things. He goes, I think you need to investigate that some more. So he explains to me what a resentment is, points me to the page in the book. Resentment is the number one offender. So I go back, I start writing resentments down, and lo and behold, I figure out that my entire life and my entire alcoholism and almost all of my drinking is driven by resentments. It's like towards the end, I remember sitting on a bar stool by myself because nobody else would hang out with me, just staring at the wall, like looking for reasons to get mad at people, right? I'm mad at the government. I'm mad at the guy at the end of the bar I don't even know. When I run out of people to be resentful for in that bar, thank God for social media, I can open up my phone and find a ton of shit to get resentful about on there. And I couldn't see it, right? I couldn't see it without the sponsor's direction, without the step forward in that inventory, how resentments were driving my life. I just thought, hey, I'm this happy-go-lucky guy, right? I'm not mad at anyone. But in reality, I'm mad at everyone. I don't even know you, and I'm mad at you. I'm looking at your hat, the way you're dressing, and I'm pissed. And because of that, I go and I drink. The same thing with the fear inventory, right? Again, big tough guy, right? I'm going to tell you that I'm not scared of anything, right? I don't have any fears. But again, on sponsorship direction, I went back and I revisited that, and I started writing my fears down. And I also started to realize that fear was a huge driver in my drinking, right? That first incident when I drank with those older kids is because I was scared they weren't going to like me. You know what I mean? And that fear drove me to drink. And, fear of financial insecurity, fear of what's going to happen in my relationships, fear of everything, man. And it's just like, because I'm so scared, I isolate and I drink. And when I'm drinking, I don't feel the fear anymore. And again, this is stuff that I couldn't have learned without a sponsor and without doing that inventory. Then it comes to that sex misconduct, right? And again, it's just like I had this weird, warped idea that like the way I was treating women was like a societal norm because I saw it on TV and I heard it in music and locker room talk and guys joking around and all that stuff. But what I learned is that behavior is dishonest, and that behavior is selfish, and that behavior is hurtful. And, I had to inventory that stuff, and I had to figure out what my part was in it, and I had to learn to get to the other side of it. And as a result of that, I learned how to have, respect for women, and I learned how to have respectful, healthy relationships. And, we do a lot of joking around, but honestly, we even try to keep that locker room talk to a minimum, even when it's just the boys, because it's not good. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for other people. It's disrespectful. And, jumping, we pair 4 and 5 all the time, but jumping to the 5th step, my experience there was one of, it's kind of like one of awakening, right? And the reason it was one of awakening for me was that I had to find the courage and the humility to tell another human being this, right? If I inventory it myself, that's a dangerous place, right? Because I'm still very dishonest in my head, right? My alcoholic brain still kind of tells me that this stuff is okay, right? But telling another human being that, it's like that true honesty that makes you actually realize that, okay, this behavior is not okay. I finally got it off my chest. I finally told someone else about it. And then you start to have this sort of spiritual experience they talk about, right, in step 5. And the spiritual experience where you can walk in true kinship with your higher power and another man, right? He shared his experience with me, right? And I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt like, I felt that sort of accepted, and not accepted for the poor behavior, but accepted because I have now taken this big step that everyone else in Alcoholics Anonymous is constantly talking about. And I've not been told it's okay and we're done. I think Mark mentioned earlier there's more work to be done here in Alcoholics Anonymous. But we're going to learn from that inventory, right? And furthermore, we're going to learn to not do that behavior anymore, right? So I've established some character defects here, right? And going into 6 and 7, right? 6 says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. I wanted to hold on to some of those defects of character. I wanted to hold on to them so bad because my entire life they protected me, right? One of the big character defects I had was just being an asshole to people. People would look at me and be like, oh, Dan just doesn't have a filter and he just says whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And I used to be like, yeah, I'm that guy. I just say whatever I want to people. I'm brutally honest, And it's like, what I learned is that's not I don't want to be brutally honest, right? Especially if it means being an asshole to people, right? And so I had to be ready to entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character, right? So I'm not going to just say, hey, God, take a couple of these, and maybe down the road you'll take a few more of these. And it's not saying that God is going to make me a perfect human being, right? It's just saying that I'm making a choice because I've done all this other work to forget about my selfish BS and be willing to let God, let God help me with these character defects. In 7, it says, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. So now I'm actually saying, I'm being humble about it. I'm admitting that I have these shortcomings, and I'm saying, hey, help me with these shortcomings. Please remove these shortcomings. And again, this isn't like a lightning bolt. bam, you're fixed, right? It's just kind of like a constant form of meditation and prayer, constant form of practice that we do in AA, where it's like, I got to be aware of these character defects, and I got to be willing to have that higher power help me with them. And step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. So I'm making that list, right? I'm looking back at that 4th step. I'm looking at all those people I resented. I'm looking at my fears. I'm looking at that sex misconduct. I know what my character defects are now. And now I'm going out and I'm writing down those people I've harmed, right? And I'm trying to be, in this situation, brutally honest as I can about it, right? Because I've been told that if you skimp on this step, you may drink again. And I remember writing those people down, right? Starting with the big ones, the glaring ones. And those were easy people, right? They were very clear in my mind. It was very easy for me to identify my family members, my wives. I don't know if Brandon knows this or not, but I'm not married to that girl anymore. She was the second wife. Those were very glaring, right? But then, like I said, there's a number of different people that I caused harm to that I needed to make amends to. That for little things, right? Like that brutal honesty and just being a constant jerk to people, women that I mistreated. And, being honest, it doesn't feel good to write these down because it's junking up those character defects again, and it feels a little crummy. But, the sponsor's there is you're kind of like it's with a pep talk, it's okay. We've all been here. Remember step 5? I did this too. So, you write the list down, right? And then you go to make the amends to them, right? And again, making amends is kind of like one of those awakenings, right? It's one of those experiences where, it's not just an apology, right? It's truly, my motive is to truly tell this person I'm sorry and believe it. I actually believe it this time. It's not just hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that again and move on, right? I'm telling you that I'm sorry and I'm making this amends to you so I can change my behavior. And I tell them that directly in the amends that, I'm doing this so I don't do this to other people anymore. And then there comes the part where they tell you something you missed, right? And sometimes you hear a lot of stuff that you didn't even know, right? You didn't even know that you were harming people that way. And that's helpful, right? Because again, our convoluted alcoholic brain can't process everything, right? So part of that amends process is getting that feedback and knowing, additional wrongs you did and making the amends for that. In step 10, we continue to take personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it, right? So up to this point, I've done a ton of work, right? I've come a long way from those 22 years of drinking. And at night, I take that inventory, but I also got to take that spot check inventory during the day. Maybe I am a dick to somebody. Maybe I do flick someone off when I'm driving down the road, right? Maybe I'm taking a nap instead of answering phone calls from people from Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Like there's a number of things that can happen during that day that are dishonest. There's a number of things that are fearful. There are a number of things that I can hide and not want to tell another person, but know that I have to, right? And the important piece of this 10th step is that I don't got to go through an entire 4-step to wake up the next morning, relate to those things that I did the day before, and then not do them again that day. And it's extremely helpful in Alcoholics Anonymous. In step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve the conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. I shared with you a little bit about that, the self-help track that I was on and the, all the crazy meditation and stuff that I used to do. And what I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is, again, my motives were incorrect. They were not aligned with the program, right? Today I spent some time meditating in the morning. And I do that so I can clear my brain, right? And once my brain is clear, now I start praying. And I pray for the will to do God's will and to help other alcoholics, right? Because when I'm junked up with all that other crap, I can't be helpful to anyone, man. If I'm junked up on fear and I'm junked up on hate, I can't be helpful to another person when they call me. I don't even want to answer the phone. I don't want to go to the meeting and carry the message. All I want to do is isolate, sit at home by myself, and be a victim, feel bad for myself, right? What I've learned is that it's important for my sobriety to be helpful to other alcoholics, to get to the meeting, to carry the message, to answer the phone calls, to make the phone calls, to give the rides. And this conscious contact that we establish with God in step 11 creates this channel, right? This channel where we can, with a clear head and a clear heart, go out in our day and be helpful to other alcoholics. And, it's been an important experience and one that I've got to try to remember to do every day. And finally, step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So there's kind of two pieces to that, right? There's the spiritual awakening that I've had as a result of doing these steps. You hear people talk about it all the time, right? And I think it's misunderstood, the spiritual experience or the spiritual awakening that you have, right? Again, it's not this lightning bolt moment where it's like, okay, I do one thing and I'm cured, right? An experience is ongoing, right? I'm having an experience right now while I'm standing up here, you know? I'm going to have an experience tomorrow, God willing, if I wake up, you know, whenever I wake up in the morning and I do the daily with my home group, right? We're constantly having an experience here, and what makes it a spiritual one is the tools that we did, right? That simple spiritual toolkit that I think Chris read about and shared about earlier in the meeting, that helps us have that experience, right? And the second piece of that is that we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. One of the things my home group has taught me and really drilled home is this need to help other alcoholics. So Brandon, I'm glad you got up here and shared that little story, because that's what we do, man. We meet newcomers, and I have that same text that I sent to you that I send to every newcomer I meet, you know? 1 out of 20 probably respond to it, but that's okay. You know, that's okay. Those people, for whatever reason, haven't hit their bottom, right? But the one alcoholic who has hit his bottom, I need to be there and I need to be willing to help that guy, right? Because I wouldn't be standing up here today if I wasn't helped in Alcoholics Anonymous. If there wasn't people doing the 12th step, I wouldn't be sober today, right? And that's very clear to me, right? The people in the rooms that reach out to the newcomer, that tell them there's a solution here and they can have it too, are the saving grace of this program. And I think AA does a really good job of creating that circle, right? This isn't like there's no finish line, right? It's not like I start here and I end here, right? It's like I start here and I continue, and I continue, and I continue. And if we continue this work on a daily basis, we're going to continue to have that spiritual experience. And if we continue to have that spiritual experience through practicing spiritual principles, through helping other alcoholics, then we're going to stay sober. And, you know, it's my goal to hit the grave without taking another drink. And there's no delusion in my brain that if I, you know, stop doing these things, that's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I got to do this stuff every day. And, you know, after some time, you kind of start to like it, you know? You meet some really cool people. Some of my best friends are in this program. And I probably haven't even met some of my best friends that I'm going to meet in the program. And it's a really cool deal. That's all I got. Thanks.